On a March evening in 1979, a 31-year-old secretary in Arlington, Virginia, went out to dinner with her coworkers after work. It was the kind of weeknight outing where someone suggests a restaurant and nobody has a reason to say no. She left with the group and spent the evening at dinner. She never came home. Her body was found the next morning in a parking lot in Glenarden, Maryland, about 15 miles east of Arlington. Evidence collected from the scene sat in storage for 45 years before anyone could match it to a name. Her name was Catherine Donahue. Everyone called her Kathy. She was 31 years old and lived in Arlington, Virginia, just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. She never married and had no children. She had a brother and a sister who both lived in the area. She worked as a secretary at an office in the D.C. metro area, went to work every day, and lived a quiet life in a suburb close enough to the capital that you could see the monuments from the right spot. Arlington, in the late 1970s, was a mix of apartment buildings, row houses, and quiet residential streets. It was close enough to the district to feel urban, but far enough to feel safe. People who worked government jobs and office jobs lived in Arlington because the rent was reasonable, the commute was short, and the neighborhoods were quiet. Kathy was part of that world. She was close enough with her co-workers to join them for dinner after work when the opportunity came up. On the evening of March 3, 1979, Kathy went out to dinner with people from her office. The group left work together and went to a restaurant. It was a normal weeknight, a normal meal, one the kind of evening that ends with everyone going home and nobody remembering it the next day. After that, the record goes dark. What happened between the end of that dinner and the moment her body was found in Glenarden, Maryland, has never been publicly explained. Whether she drove there, whether she was taken there, whether the evening ended somewhere nearby, none of that has been released by investigators. Glenarden is in Prince George's County, on the Maryland side of the D.C. suburbs. To get there from Arlington, you'd cross the Potomac, drive through the district, and come out the other side into Maryland. How she ended up there that night remains one of the unanswered details in the case. A passerby found Kathy's body on March 3rd in a parking lot in the 8400 block of Hamlin Street in Glenarden. She had been beaten to death. FBI officials who later reviewed the case described it as a brutal murder. Prince George's County Police responded immediately and processed the scene. Investigators collected biological evidence from Kathy's body, including material left by her attacker. They photographed the scene from multiple angles, documented the injuries, and began canvassing the surrounding blocks. They checked the parking lot for tire tracks, footprints, and any items that might have been dropped or discarded during the attack. They talked to employees at nearby businesses and residents of the surrounding neighborhood. They ran the plates of every vehicle parked in the lot that night and checked registration records against known offenders in the area. They looked for surveillance cameras on nearby buildings, though in 1979, very few businesses had them. In 1979, DNA testing didn't exist as a forensic tool. What investigators collected from the scene was the most important thing they had, but they had no way to read it. They preserved it carefully, sealed it into evidence bags, and put it into storage at the police department. Detectives went through Kathy's last known movements, starting with the dinner and working forward. They talked to her co-workers one by one, asking each of them when they last saw Kathy, whether she left the restaurant alone or with someone, and whether she said anything about where she was going next. They talked to her neighbors in Arlington. They checked whether her car had been found near the restaurant or near the parking lot in Glenarden. They canvassed the area around Hamlin Street a second time, knocking on doors in the surrounding blocks and expanding the radius into adjacent neighborhoods. They checked criminal records for anyone with a history of violence against women in the county and ran background checks on every name that came in from tips and door-to-door interviews. None of it produced a suspect. The attack appeared to be random. There was no known connection between Kathy and the man who killed her. He wasn't someone she knew from work, from her neighborhood, or from any part of her life. He was a stranger who crossed her path on a March evening. Without a relationship between the victim and the killer, there was no thread to pull and no motive to follow. The only link between them was the evidence he left at the scene. In 1979, that evidence was unreadable. The case went cold. The file sat in the department's records while the years accumulated. Different detectives inherited it over the decades as officers retired or transferred to other assignments. Each one read the original reports, reviewed the log of what had been collected, went through the witness interviews, and put the file back down. Each time, the same conclusion. Nothing new to go on, no name to attach to the DNA, no witness who had come forward since 1979. The case was stuck in the same place it had been since the first month. The case produced a thick folder of interviews and tips, but not a single viable suspect. Detectives had checked every name that came in during the first months after the murder. They had recanvassed the area around Hamlin Street multiple times, and they had talked to everyone they could find who had been in the area that night or who knew Kathy from work or from her neighborhood in Arlington. None of it led anywhere. The investigation had been thorough in 1979. Detectives had done everything available to them at the time. They ran down every lead, talked to every person who might have seen something, checked every name that came in, and followed up on tips from as far away as Virginia and the district. In 1979, nobody could read the DNA, and without DNA, there was nowhere left to go. DNA testing became standard forensic practice in the early 1990s. Investigators submitted the samples from Kathy's case to labs as the technology improved. The results confirmed that usable DNA from an unknown male was present. The profile was clean and strong. But without a comparison sample from the right person, having the profile didn't produce an answer. A DNA profile only tells you something if you have another profile to hold it against. Without a suspect and without a database match, the profile sat in a file alongside the rest of the evidence. The samples were tested again as newer methods became available in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Each round of testing confirmed the same thing. The DNA was there. The profile was readable. There was just nobody to compare it to. In 1998, CODIS came online. The FBI's national DNA database allowed crime scene profiles to be run against millions of convicted offenders across the country. For cold cases with biological evidence in storage, it was supposed to be the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. Investigators submitted the profile from Kathy's case. No match came back. The man who killed her wasn't in the system. Whatever he'd done before or after March of 1979, his DNA had never been collected by any law enforcement agency. The profile ran automatically against every new entry in CODIS for years after it was submitted. Every year, nothing came back. The years kept accumulating. The DNA stayed in storage at the police department, preserved and tested and retested as each new generation of forensic technology came online. Detectives who had never met Kathy Donahue and hadn't been born when she was killed inherited the file and tried again with whatever new tools were available. Kathy's brother and sister carried the case for 46 years. They were younger when it happened, still in the middle of their own lives, still processing the fact that their sister had gone out to dinner one evening and never come back. By the time the answer came, they were both in their 80s. They had buried parents and other family members in the decades between the murder and the arrest. They had watched the years pass without any word from the police department, without any new lead, without any sign that the case would ever move again. For most of those 46 years, the case was completely silent. No detective called with updates. No suspect was named. The file sat in a cabinet, and the family sat with the question. They did what families of unsolved homicide victims do. They called the detective's office, asked if there was anything new, heard the same answer, and waited. 1 year became 5, then 10, then 20. The question of who killed their sister sat in the background of their lives through decades of birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings where Kathy's absence was the thing nobody had to mention because everybody already felt it. They aged through those decades the same way the case file aged in the cabinet at the police department. The file got thicker with review notes. The family got older. Neither one moved any closer to an answer. FBI Special Agent in Charge Bill Del Bagno said at the press conference that many of Kathy's loved ones had passed away without having closure. The people who knew her best were mostly gone by the time the answer arrived. Kathy's brother and sister outlived the silence long enough to hear a name. They were in their 80s when they heard it. The family released a statement through the police department, and they thanked the investigators and said their relentless pursuit of the truth had finally given the family a sense of closure that they never thought possible after all this time. The man who killed Kathy Donahue had a criminal history that started 12 years before the murder. In 1967, Roger Zodis Brown was convicted of armed robbery in New York and sentenced to prison. He served 11 years behind bars at a state facility. His conviction predated mandatory DNA collection laws by more than 3 decades. His DNA was never taken while he was incarcerated, which is why CODIS never found him. He walked out in June of 1978 and made his way south to the D.C. area, settling in Hyattsville, Maryland. Less than a year later, in March of 1979, he had never met. He was about 36 years old. He'd been a free man for approximately 9 months. He had spent more than a decade in a New York State prison for armed robbery, and within a year of his release, he had committed a crime far worse than the one that put him away. The woman he killed was a 31-year-old secretary from Arlington, Virginia, who had gone out to dinner with her coworkers on a weeknight and never come home. Brown lived in Hyattsville at the time of the murder, about 7 miles from where Kathy's body was found. 7 miles in the D.C. suburbs is maybe 15 minutes by car. Hyattsville is a small city just inside the county line, a residential area of older houses and apartment complexes near the University of Maryland campus. Close enough to the crime scene that detectives working the case in 1979 might have knocked on doors in his general area during a wider canvass, but his name never came up during the original investigation. He wasn't questioned or interviewed. His criminal record in New York wasn't flagged because there was no system in 1979 that automatically connected a recently released felon in one state to an unsolved crime in another. There was no witness, no vehicle description, no physical evidence pointing to a specific person. The investigation never found him because there was nothing connecting them except the material on her body. After the murder, Brown left Maryland and moved south to North Carolina, settling in Pinehurst, a small town in Moore County known for its golf courses and retirement communities. The town has a population of about 16,000 and sits in the Sandhills region of central North Carolina, about 400 miles south of Glenarden. He was never arrested for anything related to Kathy's case and never connected to any other violent crimes in any state. He lived in Pinehurst for decades without incident. He went from being a 36-year-old ex-convict in Hyattsville to being an elderly man in a retirement town where the biggest news was usually about golf tournaments and property values. Nobody in the community knew what he had done on Hamlin Street in March of 1979. He was 82 years old when investigators finally put his name on the case, 46 years after the murder. He had lived more than twice as long after killing Kathy Donahue as he had lived before it. In 2024, the Prince George's County Cold Case Unit pulled Kathy Donahue's file and decided to try again. The case had been sitting in their records for 45 years. Every lead from the original investigation had been exhausted decades earlier. Every round of DNA testing through CODIS had come back empty. Traditional forensic methods had confirmed the presence of DNA but couldn't attach a name to it. But there was a new tool available that hadn't existed the last time someone opened the file. The unit submitted the forensic evidence to Othram Inc., a laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas, that specializes in advanced DNA testing and genetic genealogy. The material had been preserved since 1979, sealed in storage for 45 years. Othram scientists used advanced sequencing methods to extract and develop a DNA profile from the samples collected at the crime scene. The process is designed to work with degraded, decades-old biological material that earlier forensic methods couldn't handle. The samples were decades old, but they had been stored properly by the original investigators in 1979, and the lab was able to build a profile strong enough to search through ancestry databases. This was the 5th case in Maryland where Othram's technology had been used to publicly identify a suspect. Genetic genealogy works on a different principle than CODIS. Instead of matching crime scene DNA against convicted offenders, it uploads the profile to public ancestry databases and looks for biological relatives of the unknown person. Yet if anyone in those databases shares enough DNA with the crime scene sample, it means they're related to whoever left it. From there, investigators build a family tree using public records, tracing births, marriages, deaths and addresses generation by generation until they narrow the match to a specific individual. The profile was delivered to the FBI's Forensic Genetic Genealogy team at the Baltimore field office. The FBI team began the genealogical work, searching the ancestry databases for relatives who shared genetic markers with the unknown male whose DNA had been preserved since 1979. They uploaded the profile and waited for the system to return matches. They found them. The matches pointed to a family line in the mid-Atlantic region. From there, the team built a family tree outward, using birth records, marriage records, death certificates, and other public documents to trace the connections generation by generation. The work took weeks. The branches narrowed over time until they pointed to a specific person living in North Carolina. A man who had served time in New York decades earlier moved to Maryland after his release and eventually settled in a retirement community in the Sandhills region of central North Carolina. Investigators obtained a DNA sample directly from Roger Zodis Brown and sent it to the lab for comparison against the crime scene samples from 1979. It matched. The material collected from the crime scene in Maryland and the DNA from the 82-year-old man living in North Carolina belonged to the same person. On March 11, 2025, the Moore County Sheriff's Office arrested Roger Zodis Brown at his home in Pinehurst, North Carolina. He went without incident. An 82-year-old man answered the door of a house in a quiet retirement community and was taken into custody for a murder committed 46 years earlier in a parking lot in Maryland. He was charged with first-degree murder, rape, and related offenses. The arrest was coordinated between the police department in Maryland, the FBI's Baltimore field office, and the Moore County Sheriff's Office. Brown was held in Moore County pending extradition to Maryland. On March 18th, Prince George's County Police held a press conference at their headquarters to announce the arrest. Police Chief Malik Aziz said the case serves as a reminder that they will never give up seeking the truth, no matter how much time has passed. State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy spoke about the technology that had broken the case open. And she said she believes that as they go into the future, they'll be able to solve more cases using genetic genealogy. Del Bagno spoke directly about the family at the press conference. With this arrest, he said, justice is being served for Kathy. The answers are finally being given to her family. Brown is awaiting extradition to Prince George's County, where he'll face trial for the murder of Kathy Donahue. If convicted, he'll spend whatever years he has left in a prison cell. He spent 46 years as a free man after the murder. He went from Hyattsville to Pinehurst, from a 36-year-old fresh out of a New York State prison to an 82-year-old retiree in a golf community without anyone ever connecting him to what happened on Hamlin Street. On a March evening in 1979, Kathy Donahue went out to dinner with the people she worked with, and she was 31 years old. She never came home. If you enjoyed this case, go check out the other solved cases in the playlist.